Welcome to Business Line's State of the Economy podcast, where you'll find insight, analysis, and the story behind the numbers.
Over the last couple of months, tomatoes and onions were in the news as their prices tended to rise. In particular, prices of tomatoes zoomed to over rupees 200 a kilo. Unfortunately, with many farmers opting to plant tomatoes, their prices have now dropped to below rupees 5 a kilo. Be it when the prices soared or now when they have plunged, the processing sector was seen as a solution from both. On the one hand, it can help consumers to have tomatoes at a reasonable price through processed items. On the other, it will help growers to get reasonable prices as food processors will pay them better prices. That brings focus on the India's food processing sector. India's food processing sector is one of the largest in the world, and its output is expected to reach $535 billion by 2025-26. Let me give you a glimpse of India's agri-processing sector. It makes up 18.8% of the GVA of agriculture and allied sector to the total economy. Its total share in employment is 12.3%. Its shares in exports is 10.4%. And because of this, the cropping intensity increases by at least 36%. To tell us more about India's food processing sector, its advantages, the drawbacks, and its prospects, we have with us Vicky Dodani, founder of Agrizy. So, welcome to Business Line's State of Economy podcast. We are now going to take a look at the agri-processing sector. A couple of months back, we had problems with tomato prices hitting the roof at over 200 rupees. And then we also had problems with onion. Now, how do you think the food processing sector can play a role where on the one side, it can cushion the customers from a very high price. The other side probably ensure a better price for the grower.
So I think that's exactly the situations which the processing, the food processing can help us avoid. So if you look at it, like we would have seen multiple instances where farmers just throw their produce on the road, saying that they are not able to even get back the cost they have put in to get the cultivation and harvesting done, right? So typically what we have seen is that most of the fruits and vegetables, or what we call FNV or fresh, right? For all these products, there is a seasonality. They are grown in specific, months only. And if somehow we are able to process these products, right, during the harvesting time, right, and increase the shelf life of these products, what it will result in is, lower food wastage. At the same time, when the season is not there, when the harvesting season is not there, the same products in the process format, with higher shelf life can be used. There are multiple examples that can be, given here. So tomato, for example, is one such example that you highlighted. So tomato, if I look at it, today's, because the season has started in some parts of the country, it can be made available at about 4 to 5 rupees per kg today, right? And if we do processing on it, if we make a puree or paste of this tomato, which is raw material, 8 kgs of raw tomatoes will actually yield in 1 kg of tomato paste, right? So the method here that is being used is actually, there are pulping units which can convert raw tomato into a more processed form, which is tomato paste, keeping the nutrient value of these products completely intact, and actually, just increasing the shelf life, right? So that way, if I look at it, this 8 kg of tomato, if I even add, processing cost, packaging cost, and everything, per kg of tomato paste can, be, I would say, can give me 1 kg of tomato paste, and that the cost would be roughly 60, 65, up to 70 rupees. Now, when the season is not there, we can use this tomato paste. And a lot of these ketchup companies, tomato ketchup companies, they procure this tomato paste for their further processing. But if we are able to store tomato paste in this format with higher shelf life, we can use this during the off season. And this can ensure both, one, farmer is not throwing the produce on the roads, and they're getting better output or better prices when they sell the products in the market. And at the same time, during the off season, the rates do not actually touch the sky, right? So we are somehow safeguarded by both of these extreme situations.
So how important is the food processing sector for the development of agriculture in India, particularly when the government is saying that it wants to double the farmers' income?
Sure. No, it's a very valid point, and I think both these points, such as how does the food processing help and how do the farmers get higher income, they both are interlinked. If we compare the overall food processing industry in India versus other countries, there is a major or a stark difference that we see. The overall food processing level in the country, which is, I mean, how do we calculate this? It is basically the weighted average of the entire agri produce in the country. For every product, what is the level of processing? If we do a weighted average of that, we get to about 10% of the level of processing in the country. Now, this 10% processing of agri products in India compared to, let's say, China, which is where it's close to 40%, and some of the Western economies where it is between 60 to 80%. So what we see here is that the overall level of food processing industry in India is very low, and there is a massive opportunity for India as a country to process more and more of products, right? And if we do that right, what is going to happen is that India as a country would be connecting the global demand of processed agri and food products with the availability of raw agri products in the country. If we are able to connect both of them, what this will result in is, as we discussed, lower wastage and the higher income for the farmers. See, it is possible that sometimes we don't see the impact of let's say, because of the inefficiency in the supply chain, we do not see the impact of wastage in that specific cycle, in that specific harvest cycle. But this impact is somehow going to come back to us either in the next cycle or in the subsequent cycles, right? So that way, if I look at it, I mean, just to summarize this, there is a massive opportunity for India to actually process more products, because you take any product, any agri product, India is in the top 5 list of the overall producer list across the globe. So there is a massive, I would say, availability of raw agri products. There are underutilized capacities of food processing units in the country. If we merge both of them together, right, food processing, farmers getting higher income, as well as processors being able to process more and increase their capacity utilization.
The government and all over the country, experts have been talking about the food processing sector. It's important, but how has the industry been shaping up, particularly in the last few years, and if we can go a little beyond, say, in the last 2 decades?
Sure. So I think if I look at it, I think government, from the multiple schemes that they have rolled out over the time, like if you ask me personally, I see a clear intent from the government to actually focus a lot on agri and food processing. And there are multiple schemes. I can just tell you about some of them, right? So for example, AIF, which is Agriculture Infrastructure Fund, or for that matter, there is a PMFME, the Prime Minister Formalization of Micro Processing Enterprises in the country, right? So I think overall government is also keen on increasing the food processing levels in the country, trying to match with the global standards. So there is a clear-cut intent. There are some bottlenecks, of course, and I think over the time we would see massive ramp up across solving some of these challenges. And I think what is also coming out over the last 2 years, or for that matter the last 2 decades, I think there is a requirement from the consumers for more, I would say, convenience food, more processed form of agri and food products, right? So the acceptance has increased for the food products, and that's actually resulting in the back end supply chain getting ready for that the massive demand that is available.
I think one more thing which is of very importance for India as a country is to explore all the opportunities of increasing the processing of the product, but also finding the international demand for that. As I mentioned earlier, that India is among the top 5 producers across the globe for most of the agri and food products. If we are able to find global demand, where today, for example, China might be exporting some of those products to other countries. So I think that's where like there is an opportunity for India as a country to find global demand and then trying to match the quality standards that they need.
So how many players are there in India in the food processing?
Oh, so I think like of course we have different estimates on the number of farmers who are present in the country. But I think if we talk about the food processing as an industry, there are two different kind of entities. There is one set of entities which are like registered with the MOFPI, the Ministry of Food Processing Industry, and this is about I would say 42,000. I think these are large scale processing industries. And on the other hand, we also have NSSO data, which says that there are about 2.5 million unincorporated entities, mostly proprietorship or partnership firms, and mostly micro and small in nature, right? Yeah, so about, I would say 2.5 million, both the more organized entities and, the other set, which is unorganized in nature. So typically you would see that most of these processing industries, either organized or unorganized one, they are actually located in clusters. So for every product types, you will see that there are specific clusters where these entities are, operating, right? And these clusters have been formed either looking at the availability of raw material in those geographies, or the availability of ready-made demand in those geographies, right? So one of the two, mostly co-locating with the availability of raw material.
What are the prospects for the food processing sector, particularly with the government coming up with the one district, one product scheme?
So as I mentioned, I think ODOP is again one such I think in our opinion, one such revolutionary scheme which can help identify and cultivate those clusters for those specific kind of product, right? I think overall, if I look at it, the prospects for food processing industry look very bright. With the entire, and there are multiple macros if I look at it which are also helping here, right? So one, of course, you mentioned on the government schemes and multiple ways they have come up with, mega food parks. We talked about some of these schemes earlier. Then there is the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Sampada Yojana, which helps in the not just the farmers but also the entire supply chain in terms of building infrastructure, cold chain, logistics, and everything, right? So there is one very clear, I think, I would say set of initiative being taken from the government side. The other macros which are also helping us, right, helping the country to develop more and more food processing is the entire anti-China, or China plus one tailwind, which is helping not just Agrizy but a lot of other exporters in finding out more buyers across the globe and trying to fulfill their requirements for agri and food products, right? So the China plus one thing, where some of the large buyers across the globe are trying to set up at least one additional procurement cluster, right? And that is something which you have seen in multiple manufacturing industries. It is also applicable for agri and food processing. Apart from that, I think the entire the digitization of the entire supply chain, the telecom revolution has actually helped us, or the tech startups, to reach to very remote locations, right? And being able to connect the second half of the country, which was still or erstwhile not connected to the broad I would say other half of the ecosystem, right? So that's where the entire digital revolution, or the second or third generation of businessmen coming into the agri and food industry, I would say most of these macros are actually are good indicator for the entire food processing industry and sector in the India. And that's why I mentioned earlier, right, that the prospect looks really bright.
What are the drawbacks you see in the food processing sector that need immediate?
I think, broadly, if I look at it, there are some challenges with respect to, the infrastructure that is available today in the country, right? So although there is clear intention from government, there are a lot of startups and a lot of, industries, established industries are, companies which are coming up and trying to, get into agri and food industry and overall improve the entire backend, right from farmer till the consumer, entire backend. But so there are some challenges with respect to infrastructure which we as a country need to solve for, which includes the entire logistics piece, the cold chain logistics, and all of that, so that we even minimize the wastage. I think the other thing here is, like overall perception that we have as a country that processed food is bad, right? So there are multiple ways how we can, process the product, increase the shelf life. At the same time, we do not compromise with the nutrient and the correct nutrient values and the characteristics of the food products, right? So there are multiple such ways. We mentioned some of these examples like dehydration or drying, or let's say, pulp manufacturing. There are so many such examples, right, where the product does not lose its nutrient value. So if we, position it the correct way, right, actually informing all the consumers as well that not every processed food product is bad in nature, right? So I think if we are able to change this perception and also, create the backend infrastructure that I talked about earlier, I think some of these drawbacks, if we solve, we are going to go a long way in building the food processing industry in the country.
What would be your roadmap for the food processing sector, particularly from the farmers and the consumers' point of view?
We have been, from day one of our operation, we have actually picked up food processing as a the entire industry, or all the products and solutions that we are today building are actually targeted towards these MSME food processors, right? Both the founders, actually, we come from similar background, so we understand the pain points of the MSME food processor. So what we are essentially trying to do is build an entire stack, a full stack way of building business. The very first product category that we picked up for food processing was actually fruits and vegetables. I mentioned earlier some of the examples where if we process fruits and vegetables, we reduce waste. We also, we also keep the prices in check. At the same time, we give farmers the best price for their produce, right? So that's the reason why we picked up FNV. It has the highest wastage in the country, about 15 to 20%. So that was our first category, and over the time we have built more product categories from the buyers synergies point of view, what all products they need, and we have built those product categories accordingly. I think the way we are looking at this is we want to transform India into a global food processing hub, right? We want to take our products to across the globe, right? About 10-12% of our business today comes from exports. And we want to increase that over the time, but at the same time, give back to the to making these food processors globally competitive, right? And that will happen, then only we can compete with global agri and food processors, right? So some of these things are what we are trying to do: reduce wastage, increase the efficiency in the supply chain, make our agri food processors more globally compliant, help them compete globally, increase their capacity utilization. And at the end, actually, the results of all of that, increasing the utilization and efficiency in the supply chain, results in quality, safe products for the consumers at the right price.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vicky Dodani. It has been a very insightful interview with you, and there have been a lot of details, and you've given us a lot of how to look forward on the prospects of the food processing. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Subramani sir, for your time and for giving us this opportunity to interact with you and share our perspective.